May the face of the Lord shine on you. May He shower His blessing on all that you do. May you never know anguish, sorrow, or strife. Dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of your life.
Howdy, I'm Sue Ellen Jackson, and this is Aware Central Texas Effects of Child Abuse and Neglect. Hopefully y'all have never had to take your children through the court system, and hopefully you never will. But today we're going to be talking about child abuse and the court system, and I hope you'll stay with us. I think it's going to be an interesting conversation and probably things that we all need to know. I have with me the Honorable Judge Charlie Van Orden, and thank you, sir, for being here with us today. We're going to First of all, he's going to educate me, and if y'all don't know about the court systems, y'all too, a little bit about how our court system work in this country in general. So,
okay, thank you.
How do they work?
Well, first of all, I'm glad to be here. I appreciate being asked. It's an honor for me to be here today. And specifically, let me start off by saying I am a judge that deals specifically with child abuse and neglect cases. The legislature has provided for foster care courts that really hear nothing but child abuse and neglect cases, and I have been doing that almost 10 years now. But in our court system, basically, the court systems are basically set up on the federal level by the Constitution, and there's a Supreme Court, Circuit Court, which is the intermediate level appellate court, and of course the district courts, the federal district courts, or the trial level courts of the district system.
So the Supreme is the highest?
Is the highest. It's like a pyramid. You have the trial level, which are called the district courts in the federal system, and the circuit courts are the intermediate. They're just appellate courts, and then they funnel up to the Supreme Court that hears really 100 to 150 cases a year.
Wow.
They don't hear many. They're very selective about what cases the Supreme Court hears.
Now, are those cases the ones that we have a Supreme Court in D.C., and they actually review for the constitutionality of whatever the
constitutionality of either the statutory law that dealt with that case in court, or the statutory construction that the courts have put on the law.
Okay.
For example, you can have a law that might be constitutional, but the courts have construed it as being unconstitutional. I think one of the classic examples is, that when they had the case in California of we don't want under God, under the Pledge of Allegiance, and really it was a federal issue. It was brought up and went to the Supreme Court on the constitutionality of that provision is what happened.
Okay. So that's how that works.
Right.
Now, what is appellate court? What is that word appellate?
Appellate court is simply a court that has a special jurisdiction to hear and review the trial court's decisions. So they look at the trial court to say, did they make a mistake? Did they make an error?
Okay.
Did they abuse their discretion in the judgment that they entered? And they can either they can say, yes, they made a proper decision in the trial court, or they can send it back to the trial court and say, no, you made a mistake, do it over again. Okay,
so there's a highly publicized case going on about a young woman that is being charged with the murder of her 3-year-old child in Florida.
Okay.
And she's at the first level of being tried.
Right. She's at the trial court.
Accused of murder, and it's what I've heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but if you're a death sentence person on trial for that, will she automatically have another trial, and will that be reviewed by the appellate court? Is that how that works?
That's a good question, and first of all, let me say this, as judges, again, just as a disclaimer, we're never supposed to make any comments that would indicate to people how we might rule on a particular case. But each state has its own rules. In Texas, I believe what you're talking about is a California case or maybe a Florida case.
It's a Florida case.
Each state has its own rules. In Texas, if you're looking at a capital death case where capital punishment,
Right.
then there is an automatic appeal to the highest court in Texas. And then
Okay.
you can also appeal into the federal system. But yes, there's an automatic appeal if you're sentenced to the death penalty in
Okay.
Texas.
Now, and then the district courts, that is the municipal courts?
Well, no, so that was the federal system.
Okay,
now,
gotcha.
the state system is a little bit different. We have the municipal courts, which are the city courts. Then we have the justice of peace courts, also called small claims courts.
Okay.
And then from there you go into the county courts, and there's different kinds of county courts. There's what's called the constitutional county courts, and there's 254 of them because the Constitution set up that each county, when there's 254 counties, would each have a county court.
Okay.
And
yeah.
there's also what's called county courts at law that are set up through statutes. And then there's special county courts that deal with probate matters. So those are, so then you start, again, if you're looking at a pyramid,
Right.
down at the bottom you have the municipal courts and the JP courts. You then
Okay.
move up into the county courts, and then you move up in the district courts. I'm an associate district judge because I deal with family law matters.
Okay.
So the district courts in Texas deal with family law matters, they deal with felonies, they deal with land matters, election disputes are all in the district courts. And then from the district courts it goes up one more step in their pyramid to, again, what's called the intermediate appellate courts
Okay.
that review the decisions of the trial court. And then the highest courts on the civil side is the Texas Supreme Court, and on the criminal side is the Court of Criminal Appeals in Texas. So
Did y'all
that's
get
kind
all
of our
that?
system. It's pretty complicated.
It is, but it sounds like there's a lot of good checks and balances along the way.
There are.
Yeah.
The Texas Constitution is written in a way that you have a lot of options, and you have courts that will review the trial courts if someone thinks a mistake has been made.
Yeah, so that's good. I mean, that's part of a strong
Yes.
strong
absolutely.
democracy and a good process that works. It seems to work. We have a lady that, and I mentioned this to you earlier, I know this has nothing to do with the court that you serve, but she had a situation with a handicapped child that ended, he's not a child, ended up being incarcerated, and she learned how to navigate through the system rather than just be all mad and just hate the whole wide world for that. And I was kind of impressed by that.
Okay.
And she has been working for years trying to find the legal and proper way to get her son, whom she believes was wrongfully convicted because he was handicapped. And she's now graduated with a bachelor's and is preparing to move into law school. And I just thought, you know, only in America. You know, here's a woman that clearly had a huge problem, and she's been faithful. She's been chipping away at it, you know, faithfully, and I was impressed with that. We're going to hear from her.
Hi, my name is Rhonda Taylor. I am a legal guardian of a young man that was wrongfully incarcerated back in 2005. My son was classified as mentally incompetent, and he got into some legal issues. Through the court system, the courts violated his due process rights, which falls under the 14th Amendment of due process under our United States Constitution. And they also violated his constitutional rights under the 6th Amendment. The due process right guarantees persons their life, liberty, and property, and guarantee due process of the law. The courts denied him his rights regarding mental incompetency. The Texas procedures for Chapter 46B, they allow persons that are mentally incompetent in order to make sure that a person is competent before they're able to stand trial. The courts violated his rights in that area. The judge at one point did grant him authority in order for him to be transferred to the Austin State Hospital for 21 days in order to complete a mental health evaluation on him. But as a result of his lawyer, which violated the Sixth Amendment states that a person has a right to have counsel, but his counsel was not effective. He failed to ensure that my son was transferred out of the McLennan County Jail to the Austin State Hospital to obtain his mental health evaluation to ensure that my son was competent enough to serve time in prison. The lawyer also failed to make sure that the investigation report was entered into my son's trial records. The lawyer also violated my son's as a result of me being his court order legal guardian. By the time I reached the courthouse, the lawyer had coerced my son into signing a plea bargain to send his own self to prison for 7 years. He failed to respect the right of my order as a court order legal guardian. And when I arrived at the courthouse, he had already signed the plea. At that point, I didn't know what to do, so I just left it in God's hand. And I prayed and I prayed and I asked the Lord to show me how to help my son. As a result of the revelational knowledge that I have received under my godly man of God and the teaching and preaching of my church family and my pastor and his beautiful, honorable wife, I learned revelational knowledge because the joy of the Lord is my strength. And I was able to go to school, learn how to create documents. I learned how to research, and I also obtained my bachelor's in criminal justice. That began my journey in order to support my son's illegal incarceration. As a result of going through this journey that I've been on the last 6 years, I've entered into the Criminal Court of Appeals, which the Criminal Court of Appeals denied me. Then I went on up to the district court. The district court denied me, and right now I am in the United States Fifth Circuit, which is in New Orleans. And my next step, if God says the same, would be the Supreme Court in Washington, D.C. And I'm just asking everybody to pray and to keep me in prayer and pray for the justice system. We're under attack. The justice system is trying to get a quick fix on their cases. We need lawyers that have a heart of God, with the Spirit of God, to try to make sure that they don't violate people's constitutional rights, because that's why we have a constitution, to protect our rights. And I'm not trying to uphold anybody in any wrongdoing or anything, but I feel that if we're gonna seek justice for people and make sure that their rights are not violated according to the Constitution, that we should make sure that their due process is provided properly. Because in Psalms 119, it says that God laws overpowers man laws. And we just need a heart of God with the people. And then this way, people would not have to spend long terms in prison, 20 and 30 years before justice can be done. Thank you, and God bless you.
I think it's really inspirational that she's been able to work her way through the system to the place where she is today. But, you know, we're really not here to talk about courts in general. We're really here to focus on more your specialty, and that is the child abuse issues in the court system. How does that work?
Well, before, let me just make one comment on the preceding video.
Okay.
You know, it's important for people to get involved in the system. Sometimes there are things that need to be corrected, and I think even some judges recognize that. Of course, one of the most famous cases for me you know, dealing with the right to counsel is what's a Supreme Court case called Gideon versus Wainwright. And what happened, Mr. Gideon was charged with a felony offense in Florida for which he would go to prison. And he asked the judge for a lawyer, and the judge said, no, lawyers, you can only get lawyers if you're indigent in murder cases or in the federal system. And he said, well, I think I ought to have a lawyer. And that case went up to the Supreme Court in 1963, and the Supreme Court said, we think having a lawyer is a fundamental right. And up until 1963, from the time the Constitution was ratified in 1789 until 1963, defendants in state courts were not entitled to counsel if they were indigent. And so the system does change. The system does look out for the rights of individuals, but it takes little people sometimes to push for that. And so I appreciate the people who care enough to be involved and to take that step. Again, in terms of my court, again, we deal with the children who have been removed because of abuse or neglect.
Right.
And right now, for example, in Bell County, we have over 700 children in care. We're actually one of the more active counties in terms of the court proceedings. And I want to say this because I think people watching, it's not just a technical knowledge that they need of this system, but I think it's important to know that, you know, after 10 years on the bench, I can say that most of the people I deal with, the caseworkers, the lawyers, the service providers that are out there, the parent education, the counselors, they all really care about kids. They really, this is not something they do for money. This is not something they do for a lot of profit. This is something they do because they really care about families and they really care about kids. And on a personal note, you know, as a judge, there have been a few times, you know, that I'm wondering, you know, if I'm doing the right thing. And I will tell you, I seek a lot of guidance from the Lord, and I don't mean to sound sanctimonious about it, but that's who basically I get my strength from daily on the bench. Yeah. And I've talked to a lot of other judges, and all judges that I know recognize the authority of the Lord. You know, we're really not allowed to talk about it much in secular society because of the difference between church and state. But I think all the judges we have in this area are grounded in faith, and it's an important part of what they do. So I wanted people to know that perspective as well. Again, in my court, you know, we have a system where children have been removed by the state, and the court really makes the decision, is that a proper removal? And if it is a proper removal, if there is an immediate risk and danger to those children, what can we do to correct that? What can we do to put the families back on the right track so that they can get their kids back? And I tell people, and I tell people this in a lot of discussions, it's almost like, in my mind in a way, the process of redemption, okay? That is, we have strayed as parents. Sure. We have gotten off the path of being good parents. We need to get back on that path. We need to have a good, solid foundation in our family. And, you know, one of the first steps, of course, is repentance. You know, it's the recognition I've done something wrong. And then the system comes in and really helps you get back to that spot where you can be good parents, where you put your kids first. Really, I sum up the problems with parents in the CPS system is like the problems most people have. It's 90% of the problems of the world. Those are caused, number one, because you're not paying attention, or two, because you are putting your needs above the needs of your kids. Yeah. You know what's right to do. You know as a parent instinctively what's right to do, and you choose to do what you feel to do. And I say that specifically, we have a lot of cases, especially in Bell County, Coryell County, Lampasas, that deal with parents who use drugs. And they know that's wrong. They know it's, I mean, I can understand you're a kid, you're experimenting, it's still wrong then, but when you're a parent, it becomes especially wrong because not only are you setting an example for your kids, but you're affecting your ability to be a good parent by using drugs. And so they know that they ought not to be doing that, but they do it anyway because it feels good. And again, that's putting their needs above the needs of a human being they have brought into the world to love and take care of.
I wonder if they even think of it like that. I think the compelling need to do the drug just outweighs their ability to...
I think you're right. In fact, one of the a lot of parents will say, you know, marijuana is not that bad. Marijuana, you know, I mean, it's commonly accepted. It's in movies all the time. It's on TV.
Right.
It's a common societal thing. But I think any parent, if you explain to them, because a lot of kids are born in Bell County where their mothers are positive for marijuana. If you explain to them that marijuana is going into this fetus, into this newborn child or unborn child, it would be like if we were sitting here right now and there was a 1-year-old child sitting here on this table and we're passing a joint back and forth and we ask the 1-year-old if he wants a toke on it. Everybody in society would be outraged by that. But they can sit there smoking marijuana, pregnant, and not understand that they're feeding it to a child against his will.
Absolutely.
And that in and of itself tells us that's extremely bad judgment by a parent.
Right.
A lot of times the parents, though, the department will not remove for that. They will work with them and try to educate them to get them off. Obviously, we don't want every child in Bell County probably whose parents smoke marijuana in care. That would be ludicrous and outrageous. So a lot of times the department tries to educate parents and help parents before they get involved in the system. The system are the more extreme cases.
Right.
So if you look at a typical year in Bell County, we might have 3,000 referrals for abuse or neglect, but we only are going to remove about 150 to 200 kids. So there's a lot of kids out there and a lot of abuse and neglect that do not make it into the legal system because we can deal with it on a different level.
Which is a good thing, because like you said earlier, you don't want to take every child out of a home where the parent is
It's extremely traumatic to take
judgment.
kids out of home. It has to be a severe risk and danger to the child to get involved in the court
Almost
system.
a really threatening situation for a child to be removed like that. And then it's a huge expense to the state. It's worth it because our children are our future. But
well, and the expense issue is interesting too, because as you know and I know, Bell County for years has ranked near the top in terms of children who've died as a result of abuse.
Absolutely.
And that's not something. How do you put a dollar on that? You know, how what is that worth?
Right.
And to
That's
save
a whole
one child.
other subject.
To save one child. You know, how do you put a financial cost on that?
We've run out of time.
All right. Well, I appreciate it.
Well, we're going to hear from a lady that has been sharing her life story with us, and it's a horrific story of abuse, and she's going to talk about her experience as a child with the court systems.
When I was 19, my dad went to jail. Well, actually, it was like between 19. He was the first time that I was able to go with the court systems. Back in Pennsylvania, you were able to go back on charges. They added something. It was what the heck was it? I forget what they called it. But anyway, 5 years after my 18th birthday for certain charges, and then 3 years for other and 2 years for other charges. Statute of limitations, that's what it's called. They ended up putting it into the court system. And this is what ended up happening. My dad went with another woman, and he had 3 more children. He had another little girl, and she was about 4 years old when I ended up starting to have flashbacks really bad. And something told me that I needed to protect her because I wasn't the only person that my dad sexually abused. He had sexually abused some of my cousins on my mom's side, and he had sexually abused one of his cousins on his side of the family. So at that point in time, I felt like I needed to protect my little sister. You know, I've never met her, but I knew that I needed to be there for her. I went to court. It was we had the preliminary hearing, and then he was pleading not guilty. He had a public defender, and the public defender told him that he needed to hire a private attorney because he wasn't going to be able to defend him well enough in court. He was going to need a private attorney. So he ended up filing for a private. He got his own private attorney. His family did, and the private attorney ended up not even. Once they found out everything, he pleaded not guilty. But then when his private attorney told him that if you don't plead guilty, for the charges, you're going to spend more time in jail. Well, he went to court. We went to court the first time. I had quite a bit of people with me, and I had a detective, and he was excellent. I can't even say his name, but he was like, we became really close during the time. He ended up going to where my dad lived in Delaware when they went to bust him, and he made sure my dad was escorted back, you know, and stuff like that. We were very close during the whole trial. I needed somebody strong, and he was a big, strong guy, and you know, we joked a lot during the outside. But when my dad pulled up in the van from the prison, boy, that was probably one of the hardest days of my life, because I hadn't seen him since I was like 12 years old, and I was 19 then. And it was probably one of the biggest things I think I ever did in my life, was having him retried, you know, tried then at that age, because everybody told me he was going to win, I would win, but I didn't care whether I won. I wanted him to face what he had done. You know, all those years went by from 12 to 19, and I was in institutions and in foster care because of him, you know, and I had fear for my own life that he may come after me after telling me, hey, people. I didn't know what was going to happen. But after we got into the court hearing, he eventually pleaded guilty. He got sentenced for 12 to 14 years. I mean, excuse me, 4 to 14 years, and he ended up spending 12 years out of his life in prison. When he got out of prison, and after 12 years, he ended up with leukemia and ended up dying within like 5 years of being out of prison. He wasn't out that long, so. But that's like the court systems in Pennsylvania. I don't know how they are here. But, you know, it was good that they came back with the statute of limitations for children after the age of 18. It's because, you know, I think it's hard for younger kids to be able to face parents, especially in, you know, in a courtroom. So, but it's just, court systems are very hard for children.
I hope you've learned something about the court systems today, and I certainly have, and I want to thank you, Judge Van Orden, so much for coming. I know you're a very busy man, and I know that you love those kids that you serve and those families. I know you do, and thank you so much. If you have any questions or if you want to contact us, please don't hesitate. Our number is 254-939-7582.
May the face of the Lord shine on you. May He shower His blessing on all that you do. May you never know anguish, sorrow, or strife. Dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of your life.